do it. Starting stream. Are we starting the stream? Are we on? Are we going? Are we live? We're live. Apparently we're live.
Hey!
How are you, Jerry?
Good news. I'm good, Warren. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. Have you been the last 2.5 hours since the last time I spoke to you?
Oh, just living the Ryan.
Living La Vida Loca?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's wonderful. Hi, everybody. We're finally here. We've got a nice, intimate, Produce Like a Pro Academy group. That's what I like to see. Can you ask Matt to make sure he posts in the Academy, let everybody know we're live now? So everybody, hey, Bam, hey, Michael, hey, Mark, hey, Aaron. How are you all? Hope you're all doing marvelously well. Jerry, we're back.
Yeah, back for the second dose of Beatles for the day.
2 times.
Yeah.
2 times is a charm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good evening, Mark. Hello, Michael. Hello, Aaron. Sorry about that. That it was a little bit of a pain. Oh, Sam is asking me a question over in Germany. Sam wanted to remind everybody, which is all only a handful of people on, that the masterclass. Sam wanted to remind me about the masterclass. We've actually sold a whole bunch already, but there's still some places left for the masterclass. We just launched it like an hour or 2 ago. The masterclass is going to be at Blackbird, and it's actually kind of pertinent because the owner of Blackbird, Mr. Danny McBride, is a huge Beatles fan, hence the name Blackbird. And if there's anything Beatles related, he owns it. I think he has like every 1960s Ludwig Ringo kit you could think of. I mean, if it's Beatle related, he owns it.
Well, mercifully, he only needs 4 kits then, right?
Yeah, well, he has everything. He has that. He has Fairchilds. He has the RS-124. All of that stuff. Pretty amazing. Yeah, wow. Pretty damn amazing. So anybody that go check it out. Are you able to post a link to the page? Maybe Sam's able to post it. We'll put it up here. We've already had a few people sign up already, so that's pretty remarkable and absolutely, truly wonderful. But anyway, so hope you're all doing wonderfully well. The books are on my Christmas wish list, says Michael. Well, that's really good.
Thank you. Wish away.
So we covered a lot of stuff in the YouTube one, obviously. So those people that watch that, but I'm sure that we'll end up going back over some of the things because we're talking about like Rubber Soul, Revolver Beatle, period Beatle. Is Revolver the latest album that's covered in this?
Yeah, it goes 1965 and 66. So it starts with Help, Rubber Soul, and then Revolver. Nice.
What a transition.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. In that very short span of time, a year, they're moving from the end of the Lovable Mop Top phase into full-on studio experimentation. The pace of the Beatles' development was absolutely rapid, and this is probably the period that expresses that in its most complete sense. Because they're moving from where they were doing, essentially the same thing they've been doing for a couple of years with the 4-track, where backing track, a handful of overdubs mix it, up to when they hit Revolver. Now they're doing tons of tape reduction remixes. They are really moving outside the constraints of the 4-track, even though they have to use a 4-track to do that. So yeah, pretty remarkable change, and then growth as well as musicians, songwriters, performers.
I know it's when I think of those albums, because Help, we didn't see. This might be nice because everybody here obviously can go and watch this, but also can go and watch the YouTube, and they'll see us talking a lot about Rubber Soul and Revolver. Let's go back a little bit and talk about Help, because let's not forget that Help is absolutely beautiful sounding record, and that was Norman Smith, yes?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was working on the session. Ken Scott was working on those sessions as engineer, and so that's Ken had been doing tape op work since A Hard Day's Night, but now he's fully integrated into the in-studio team.
Wow. I mean, Ken is such a sweetheart. When I met him the other day, I was a little intimidated, by the way. I'm actually opening up Help here on my phone so I can have some discussion points.
Sure.
Yeah, I was a little intimidated because he, without getting off too much on a tangent, he also made Hunky Dory.
Yeah. What an album.
So it's like going. He also made Hunky Dory, and which is absolutely insane. It's absolutely crazy. This is real world here. Excuse me a second. The drummer of the Sundays is calling me. He just landed in America. Hey, Patch. Hey, Patch. Hey, Patch. Patch, can you hear me? I love you. Good day to you. I love you dearly. I'm actually on a live Q&A with a bunch of people, and they can hear me talking to you. Can I can I call you? Hello, everyone. This is oh, I can't get it to go to speaker. I was going to introduce you. Let me. Can I call you back in like an hour or so? Would you be available? All right. All right. All right. Talk to you in a little bit. Bye. That's pretty funny. So that's one of my oldest school friends. I often talk, and I love the fact this is in the academy because we all know each other. I often talk about this. I went to school with possibly the biggest collection of talented people ever in the history of the world. Malcolm Gladwell talks about that. My school friends were Patrick Hannon, the drummer with the Sundays, who ended up now running one of the biggest touring companies in England. Matt Butcher, who is the front of house for Blur and the Gorillaz, and just is a tour manager and whatever. Jute Butcher, his brother, who ran outside broadcast for the BBC. Spike Stent, who's the biggest mixer in the world, went to my school.
Holy smokes!
The original or the second drummer for what's that big American band for? I'm blanking. It's ridiculous. I can keep going. So many. Oh, Lee Anderton is a friend of mine who runs Anderton's. He was my age as well, and from my area as well. Crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Something in the water.
Yeah.
Something in the water.
And your fine self. Don't forget your fine self there.
I know. Well, it's very, very, very blessed. Okay, so I've got Help open. Sorry about that, Academy people. We can get away with a little bit more. Warren being the silly man that I am, we can get away with that a little bit more than we can when we're on live YouTube. I'll get crucified on YouTube. Well, not literally. Okay, so here is our track listing, Help, which is a masterpiece. What is interesting about the song, and I challenge everybody to go back to Help, is it's one of the most upbeat, positive, musically sounding songs. Until you read the lyrics.
Yeah. It's and the recording of it was pretty unique, especially when it came to the mono version of it. I don't know, do you know the story behind that?
I don't know.
So they had tracked the song, and then realized as they were getting ready to pass off a mix to United Artists that the opening sequence that was going to contain the song was just going to be the Beatles. And the recording at that point had a tambourine on it. So I don't know if it was union rules, the British Musicians Union, as it relates to live performance, but they made a determination that they could not have a backing track with tambourine if there was no one on screen shaking a tambourine. So they re-recorded the vocals for it for the film, but that version with the re-recorded vocals actually ended up being a release version for the single.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they went to CTS Studios, a dubbing studio. So they didn't do them at EMI. They did them at CTS, and where they do sync work and that sort of thing. So, yeah, so pretty interesting. So there's a variation for you to listen for: stereo, tambourine, mono, no tambourine.
And the mono's the one in the movie and also the single?
Exactly.
And on the album, if you buy the stereo, it's got the tambourine in it.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, wow. Danny says, greetings from Darwin in Australia. Mark Peacock says, the variation is in such a time is remarkable. Did their chart success make it easier to use the studio in the way they did? I mean, definitely. Got more money.
Well, I mean, it's Parlophone was an EMI property, and EMI Studios were an EMI property. So it's really, who do we give our property to? And the Beatles were the biggest selling band in the world. Yeah, they can pretty much name what studio time they want after they've achieved that status. That really did buy them the freedom to make the music that they ended up making. They didn't start taking advantage of it really, kind of starting to break the rules until until you start working on Revolver.
I suppose my question is then, just sticking on Help for a second. How long was the recording process on Help?
For the album?
Yep.
Just a second here. I kind of break these things down into eras, and Help was the entire Help period, including singles, was like 172 days. So it wasn't wasn't a short period of time necessarily.
Right.
And if I recall, the work on the album or work through the era was also broken up a little bit by the work demands for the film itself. So it was extended. But the work on the songs was typically compact for the Beatles, where they would spend at most a couple of sessions on the songs, and at most a session for the mono and a session for the stereo mixes.
So I'm looking at rejected songs. If you've got trouble, are these released in other formats? Are they on the anthologies or anything like that?
Yeah, you'll find a lot of if you've got trouble on anthology, there's oh goodness.
That Means a Lot. Was that?
Yeah, That Means a Lot. Oh my gosh.
Is that a bad song?
It's a tough song. I mean, song. It's interesting. The way that I look at That Means a Lot is it's kind of a cool track. It had potential, but it also sounded like they're just trying too hard. Trying too hard to make a clever pop song. And it shows. The Beatles magic was, even in the most complicated songs, it's the magic of pop music. The most complicated things, if they're executed right, sound effortless.
Right.
Sort of like a great actor. Like, you never hear a great actor described as, man, you can really see that guy working. It's always, right. It seemed, like he was just there living it, or he or she was just there living it. And the Beatles had that quality when they were doing even the most complicated music. I'm the Walrus, Day in the Life, things from that 67 era. They made it seem effortless. Well, That Means a Lot has a lot of effort in it.
Right. There's a great thing here. It says Lennon stated that for the album's title track, it was a sincere cry for help, which I think lyrically it definitely is. He said it regretted changing it from a downbeat piano-driven ballad to an up-tempo pop song, which was done only as the result of commercial pressures. Is there a demo version of it available on piano, slowed down? That would be amazing.
There are a number of the songwriting demos that are out there. I'd have to look in my catalog to see what I've got from that era. Lennon always talked about regret around how Help was produced, because the content was so personal. But the game's the game, and the Beatles were in it at the highest level. And sometimes there's a nod to, especially in that era, there was a nod to, we got to do what's going to sell records. Right. We have to do a little bit about what's expected. Now, of course, the Beatles were one of the first bands to really. I think the Beach Boys are actually probably the first band, but the Beatles were early on the train of breaking free from those types of constraints, and once free of them, they never returned to them. They never, and honestly, it's probably is Revolver that reflects that, where they're doing. Well, Tomorrow Never Knows is a song with one chord, C, for the whole song. Right. So try selling that one today. Well, you might both sell it today, but try selling that one in 1966. A little bit harder to do.
Well, I mean, with the exception, I suppose, of the Climb Down, Eleanor Rigby's E minor and C.
Yeah, well, again, we're in the Revolver era, right? Yeah. We're making music that we want to make now. We're done feeding the pop machine, even though all these things fed it, because when the Beatles did it, it was just so good. You wanted to hear it, and radio was buying it. So,
hey, Sean says it's liked and shared. This is actually only Sean. This is actually only Academy members only. It's unlisted video. That's why there's a small group
don't like it, Sean. Whatever you do.
No, you can like it, and you can share it. I'm not going to stop anybody sharing. But this is just for the Academy members. That's why there's a smaller amount of people here, and we can talk here. So Michael B says, were the Beatles really the first people to run the tape backwards? And if so, whose idea was it?
Well, there was backwards tape on the song Rain. I believe that was the first time that really came into play, the vocal. And I think it happened as an error, a technician's error. Oh. Well, initially. And then once heard, it was like, that's so cool. I don't follow, and with the work that I've done, I didn't follow out to track that sort of occurrence, a kind of biographical occurrence, something like that, the first time of this or the second time of that. Certainly in the popular consciousness, Rain is one of the first times that those kind of sounds are heard.
Right. But it's kind of, we don't know who sort of originally came up with the idea or wanted to try it.
No, again, I believe what happened was, if I'm remembering the story correctly, so if I'm not, forgive me, was that they put the pancake on upside down when they were doing a playback of it, and so everything came out backwards. And hearing the vocal, John was like, "That's cool."
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, and Wait was actually written for this album, but didn't appear until Rubber Soul.
Yeah, Wait didn't make the cut. So Wait was, and it just wasn't up to the quality. McCartney would describe some songs as what he called them work songs. So they were just songs that filled a slot on an album or a B-side of a single during this era. And you have to appreciate, at Help, we're still in the full throes of Beatlemania. These guys they're doing radio, TV, interviews, print interviews all the time. They're touring still, relentlessly, and they're producing 2 albums a year. So, cranking out a song when you get a chance in a hotel room, part of the game for them right now. And sometimes the songs were fantastic, and sometimes the songs were Wait. So
it's interesting. I really like Wait. I mean, I like everything that George Harrison did. I think he was an absolute genius and an amazing songwriter, and certainly grew into one of the greatest songwriters by the end. But You Like Me Too Much sounds like a song from 2 or 3 years beforehand. That like me too much and I you.
Oh, yeah.
I really do. But, Wait till I come back to your. If somebody said to me the choice between Wait and You Like Me Too Much, I probably would have gone with Wait. So the only reason why I think that is I'm thinking to myself, you know, you hear a lot about how John and Paul didn't embrace George as a writer so much, but the fact that they let a song like You Like Me Too Much on the record, which is a great song, don't get me wrong, but certainly isn't. You know, I Need You is an amazing song.
Yeah, it's a cool song.
I Need You. You know, that's a great song. And the production's amazing. You know, that slide sound, whatever that is. I don't know how they did that. It's just incredible.
Guitar. It's a guitar. You know, George was going to get his, you know, eventually George started getting his songs on the album. And you know, that's you know, some of that's band politics, but you know, certainly George was a kid. You know,
well, he had nothing on Beatles for Sale. He had nothing on Hard Day's Night. He hadn't had anything since with the Beatles, which was what Don't Bother Me.
Yeah.
So it's probably a big deal for him to get 2 songs.
Yeah, and he didn't have and you know, he wasn't producing the songs, or they just weren't making the cut. You know, clearly with the song like You Like Me Too Much, you can see he's learning from his mentors. He's learning from Lennon and McCartney what's happening there, and yeah, you know, they'd heard it before. And one of the things that you learn that I've learned about the Beatles is once they'd done something, they weren't horribly patient to do it again. They kind of wanted to move on. And so, you know, Harrison was trotting ground that they had already walked on for Lennon and McCartney. So, yeah, not a lot of patience for him until he really, you know, comes into his own, obviously, and really starts producing real quality work by the White Album era. AJ's
online and he said he was watching the wrong one. He was watching the earlier one. Yeah, this is Academy members only, AJ. It's only a small group of us here that we can talk. We're talking about Help mainly because I felt like we with hundreds of people online before. Hey, AJ, with hundreds of people online before, they were sort of obviously directing us towards Revolver primarily, and then Rubber Soul, because those are the big momentous changes. So I just wanted to touch a little bit on Help, because as a kid, I remember that album speaking to me, and the film is so good. Such a great movie. Now, wait, was it the same as Hard Day's Night, where they had all of the songs from the movie on one side, and then all the other side were, or did they change that format up?
I believe Help was treated more as an album.
Oh, it was, okay.
Not songs from
from the movie.
Yeah,
because there was a lot of.
Because Yesterday's in the mix there, and which doesn't show up in the movie, and but as far as production, as far as when they were working on the album, they were certainly the front end of this. Other than getting out the single, the first song they recorded for the era was "Ticket to Ride," so that was the first thing that they did. Diving into that era of recording. But they were, getting the work done they needed to get done. They had to produce songs for the film, get those done. But as far as the programming, I don't think it strictly follows the movie in the same way that Hard Day's Night does.
Yeah, I'm looking at notes here. I think the other thing that really confuses a lot of us that weren't in America, not that I was around, obviously, when these albums were coming out, but just the fact that there was all these multiple versions. Now, I understand that America was trying really heavily to cash in and create new albums. But yeah, like here I'm reading, Act Naturally wasn't on Help. It was on Yesterday and Today. With Bad Boy and Dizzy Miss Lizzy. Yeah,
you have to, honestly, I being originally from the U.S., now I live in Canada, but, I was exposed to the U.S. versions, and some of them seemed awfully thin. Hard Day's Night was film music on the B-side of the U.S. release, like the score.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So I've never had the American version of that.
Yeah,
I did buy an American version of Revolver, and I don't think it had Dr. Robert on it, did
doesn't
it?
have Dr. Robert on it. Doesn't have a Andrew Bird Can Sing is not on it
Andrew
either.
Bird Can Sing, which is crazy.
Yeah. So, yeah, Rubber Soul is different. Rubber Soul has pieces of help on it. And so Rubber Soul in the US almost sounds like the Beatles country album. Just because it's heavy on acoustic because of how they reprogrammed it. But to truly understand the Beatles catalog and the arc of their work, you have to ignore the North American releases. You just have to ignore them. They were as you mentioned, they were out to make as much money as they could off of them, and then they had, in addition to having guys like Dexter down there at Capitol in L.A., deciding that there just wasn't enough reverb on with the Beatles, and so when he carved that up for the Beatles' second album, it's just a wash in reverb. That was never intended. So yeah, you have to ignore the U.S. versions of the Beatles catalog to really appreciate what they did.
Oh, here's an interesting one. I've never heard this question asked, and you may not know the answer, but what were the drum heads that Ringo used? Do you know what they were?
There's a guy named, I think it's Gary Astridge, and he has a website called Ringo's Beatle Kits. And he is Ringo's what would be the term? Archivist. So I think he was a drum tech for Ringo at one point, but he put together all of this. Like kick drums have a stop, have a little rubber stop that keeps them from moving forward.
Right.
Gary can tell you what that stop is.
Wow. That's some good details.
Yeah. I lost your feed there, Warren.
Oh, you lost me looking at my lovely face?
Yeah, I see you with there you're back.
That's strange. Yeah, that's me clicking around. Give me a second. I am finding that I found it. Wow, he's a giant.
Really nice guy.
He's so tall.
Really, really nice guy. Super knowledgeable.
Did you give him a call and talk to him about this stuff? Were you able to go through things with him?
I have used him as a resource. Absolutely. Yeah, he's the man. So yeah, I mean, I tried when I was putting together what I was doing.
I just put up the link, everybody. By the way, I found it. To do what I was doing right, I looked to the best authorities that I could find on all of this, and some of them are just they're just not known, and Gary's one of those kind of hidden gems that he can tell you everything about it. Everybody in the Academy knows now. I like this inside stuff. This is really, really cool. Michael B says, talk about the Fairchild 660 use. And he said, is there a software equivalent today? Excuse me. I've never compared. I've never done a Fairchild shootout. And do you know why I've never done a Fairchild shootout? Because I've never found two that sound exactly the same. I don't know if there's such a thing. It's like trying to do a U-47 shootout. Anything with tubes that's old tends to sound different to anything else that's old. You can never get them to... So... which one was modeled when you use the emulations? Is it? It's so difficult to make those choices and those decisions. So I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a 116 or a 660 or 666 emulator out there.
Right.
But as far as the use of the Fairchild, keeping in mind that limiters are high ratio compressors. They were primarily employed on the drums, or they were employed as a special effect to really crunch something down. Like I think.
Now, when you say the drums, can I stop you on that? When you say the drums, do you mean like recording?
Yeah, recording.
Or bouncing?
Uh, most of the time, they were printing. Like the chain, the chain was direct into the red boards out to the Studer. So they interrupt. So what would we call them? They were inserted in line.
Right.
It was was the most common way that those were used. And again, the limiters didn't have a whole lot of use other than the drums. And again, when they wanted special effects, they would bring a limiter into the chain. So that's just something to keep in mind. Why did they do it that way? The boards were so limited on their ins and outs and their inserts. I think only 2 inserts on the red boards, period. So you pretty much had to make your decisions for the sound coming in, what you wanted to do with it.
That's really interesting. Really, really interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about how that might actually work in reality. How they would have been doing that. Okay, let me go back.
Yeah, we can't do auxiliary channels with a red board.
Right, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. Great site. Everybody's checking out the site. I think this might be my first members only, Warren. Yep, that's okay, Sean. Yeah, we try to do this kind of stuff because, ultimately that's what the Academy is about. It's about having a little bit of an inside look. Like, I was able to take the phone call from my old friend Patch Hannon, and I felt like the thing about what we do here is we try to make this a bit more real and a little less kind of, presenting the best, like, oh, this is the rosy view of everything. Because actually, I think I'm very positive about the music industry. I'm very positive about what we do and about the potential to make a good income. I'm very positive about it. But I don't feel like we need to be marketing all the time. We should just be talking about the real life, where when I'm watching most YouTube videos, I know I'm being marketed to. So I'm just trying to, that's why I like the Academy. It gets us a chance to break down this stuff. Danny also says this is the first time you'll be able to watch a live Q&A. Great. Very interesting. That's nuts. Reason as the Mac DSP RE for the 670. Yeah, I mean, I love Mac DSP stuff, full stop. So I can always praise Colin McDowell. I think he's great. So what about the song If You've Got Trouble? I don't know that one.
Another tough Ringo tune that just and as we were mentioning in the earlier talk, another like 5-note melody. That's it. Whole song.
And I mean, the question is it available anywhere?
Oh yeah, I think it's on. It made it on one of the anthologies.
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
I've got my anthology poster over there. I think I should know this stuff, shouldn't I, Eric? And is it with Ringo singing it, or is it just a demo?
Ringo singing, and
wow.
And you got just some really horrible backing vocals by Lennon and McCartney. Yeah, it's a bad song.
Oh wow! So we talked a minute ago about that. That means a lot. That ended up being a PJ Proby single.
Yeah. So the Beatles were always selling songs. Oh come on! I'm trying to think of one that Peter and Gordon did. That's just like a dynamite song that should have been a Beatles song. I'm
going to look it up. I know Peter Asher. He's an old friend. I haven't spoken to him for a little bit, but I'll
see him
tomorrow. We're in the Academy. You're going to see him tomorrow?
Yeah, he's going to be at the New Jersey Beatles Fest that I'm heading to tomorrow.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That'll be great. I haven't seen him in years. We did. He and I did some recording together for the Fray because we did the anthology. We did the. What track did we do? Wow, I don't remember what song we did.
World Without Love is the one that I'm.
World Without Love, yeah.
Just a dynamite song.
It is a great song. Well, I mean, anybody that's a Beatles fan will know that Peter's sister, of course, was Jane Asher.
Yep.
So Jane was Paul McCartney's boyfriend girlfriend, sorry, obviously they were boyfriend, girlfriend. And for a while, Paul lived in the Asher's household with the mum, dad, Peter, and everything. And Peter was A&R for Apple Records. Peter signed James Taylor. And the first bad sort of psychedelic hippie album that came out that bombed, he actually left Apple. He talks about it. I'm sure he'll talk about it when you see him. He left Apple and moved to America and became James's full-time manager and producer, and is responsible for James Taylor's, basically his career. He also worked with Leonard Cohen a lot. Mm-hmm. He told me lots of great stories. One of the ones he told me, this is really contentious, but we're in the academy. He told me that actually the person that had the worst temper in the band, guess who do you think it was?
George.
George, yeah. He said George had the worst temper. He said that they had a big meeting in the Apple building, in Savile Row, and they're having a big meeting, and he said you could just hear George, F this, F that, screaming at everybody, and then eventually ran out and slammed the door. Yeah, he said George is the one that everybody considers to be meek and mild, but it was almost probably, I don't know, probably because he was simmering. That was kind of the feeling.
Yeah, and
I'm a huge George Harrison fan. I'm not being anything negative.
Oh yeah.
This is an academy conversation, and I'm letting people know what Peter Asher personally told me.
Well, but I think another aspect of what you're bringing up, which is just, I think it's important for people that are working in engineering and producing and that to understand is these are just people. These are guys. They got emotion, guys and gals. They've got emotions. They have bad days. They have their own expectations that are and disappointments that they face. And sometimes those days happen when you're working with them. And so there's I grew up with the Beatles and with all of those images of Ringo the dopey one and Paul the cute one and John the smart ass and and George the quiet one. It's fantasy.
It's an oversimplification of cartoon character versions.
Yeah, it's a cartoon character. It's just that's not who those guys were, and and from George's later interviews that he felt everything as far as like the blows that those guys took, and also kind of what they suffered through the fame to give to us. There's his most famous quote around that, I think, was they gave us their money, but we gave them our nervous systems.
Right.
So.
Yep, I agree. There's now I'm being asked what our favorite Beatles songs are, and I basically my two. And nobody should have a favorite Beatles song if a Beatles fan's probably, so I'm probably wrong by even saying this. But my two are Hey Jude and Don't Let Me Down.
Yeah, Don't Let Me Down's great.
What a great song. I mean, like that. Can you pass me an acoustic while I'm talking crap? I just love that,
You can
pass me I think the whole of Let It Be, that pick, yeah. Just that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Don't let me down. And it just said, don't let me down. Oh, this is such a beautiful melody, but, it's so passionate and so raw. Love that song. But but Hey Jude, and this is just self-indulgent for a second. I'm famous for being self-indulgent with this stuff. When my son was born, I sang Hey Jude to my wife in the operating theatre, and afterwards the nurses said to us, of all the hundreds of deliveries they've ever done, they've never had a husband sing to a wife during the birth.
Oh, sweet. That's what you can be self-indulgent about that crap all day long, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but you know what it is. Yeah, somehow
Love is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So people are saying Penny Lane. Penny Lane. Oh, what a masterpiece! Now that's got to be sped up. It's got to be sped up on the vocal.
Well, it's interesting.
He just sounds like he's up here. It's not that he sounds like he's singing high.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's playing back fast.
Yeah, well, they're using Varispeed on it, so there's a slight increase on the playback speed.
Yeah.
Now, Penny Lane is obviously a very complicated recording. There's the piano track is made up of 3 pianos. Just to start, that was just the start of the work on Penny Lane, was McCartney laying down 3 different pianos to play to play that part. They were using as they were getting into, Penny Lane was the beginning of the Pepper era. So we're leaving Revolver now, and we're moving into Pepper, starting with Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, and When I'm 64. And as they were leaving Pepper, they were leaving Revolver, they were well versed in the use of Varispeed. So Varispeed, or frequency control, was using a oscillator and a power amplifier to drive the motor for the Studer at speeds incrementally faster or slower than the 2 standard tape speeds of 7.5 inches per second and 15 inches per second. Right. And they had actually, the engineers at EMI had mapped it. They knew that the machines normally ran at 50 cycles. And so they knew at 55 cycles that I am at a quarter semitone above pitch. At 45, kilocycles, I'm, half a semitone below normal pitch. So if they wanted to adjust a song, they knew what the variation that they had to run into that motor to get that pitch out of it. It's just brilliant.
Right. I think it's total genius. There's so much to talk about with this. I feel like what is an overriding thing that in all of our discussions now, we've had a few of these now. One of the things I keep remembering, and I know we've talked about it, but it's important from the engineering production standpoint, is that actually England in particular, or United Kingdom, or Great Britain, whichever you want to, I suppose Europe in general, but was behind the technology of the States. I mean, so basically at Revolver, was that still all 4-track?
Yeah, entirely 4-track.
It's completely on 4-track.
The Beatles didn't get to 8-track until midway through the White Album. 1968 was their first work on 8-track. And the U.S. was doing it, a couple years before. Now, Revolver was an album that they had initially looked at going down to Stax and doing in the States. They were thinking about recording it there, and actually, came and did some exploration as to, doing the work there. I'm not quite sure why they didn't end up doing the work in the Stax studios, but the influence shows up on a song like "Got to Get You Into My Life."
Wow, that's that would have been really interesting if they ever had it, because I know obviously they did some stuff at Trident, I believe. They obviously famously did some stuff at why am I blanking? I worked there.
They did Olympic.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, Olympic,
they did stuff
Regent.
at Olympic. Yeah, Regent. But if they'd ever traveled to the States and made albums over here, I wonder what that would have been like. I mean, obviously John Lennon loved making albums, particularly in New York. I mean, once he found Jack Douglas and Roy Sakala and Shelley Yakis, and he found those team of guys, he was permanently, those guys all made records with John in the 70s, and of course up to 1980 with beginning of Milk and Honey, and of course Double Fantasy. But never the Beatles. The Beatles didn't do which Pink Floyd did. They came over, and Led Zeppelin, of course. And of course, more famously earlier on, the Rolling Stones came over and made whole records, whole albums in America. I wonder, now you think that was a stylistic thing, or you think that was because, going back to what you were earlier saying, they were on EMI and EMI owned the studio?
Yeah, I think as much as anything, it was just a cost thing. McCartney was grousing about the lack of bass in their recordings, and they were always trying to find out what was the secret sauce that gave the pop music out of the U.S. such a nice bottom end that they weren't getting. EMI was very conservative about how they mastered and cut discs for the low end. And McCartney's constant complaint was, look, these are records, and why can't we get the bottom end that they're getting on those U.S. discs? It's ridiculous. What are they doing over there that we're not doing here? And I think Martin came over to Capitol in Los Angeles to check out the gear and check out what they were doing with it. And it all came for naught. I mean, they just went back and did what they did in the UK. What ultimately came into play, though, was McCartney did get the low end he was seeking. And it started with songs like Rain and Paperback Writer, where he was starting to get the presence of the bass that he wanted. Some of it had to do with the bass being recorded individually on its own track. That helped, of course, because you could isolate the EQ on that particular portion of the recording. Wasn't going to affect or muddy up something else that they might have recorded simultaneously, like if they recorded on the backing track. So that was part of it, and he got the engineers to push things. Now, by the time you get to Pepper, you've got the bass fully forward, and and what a huge difference in character that their sound has when that bass is fully forward. The remasters that they did in 2009 reveal more of the bass because of what we're able to do nowadays with pulling out certain aspects of the frequency range. So that actually reveals McCartney's work. And one of the great things about those remasters is remembering that they're performing these early songs. They're performing a lot of it live, and you listen to what McCartney's playing and singing, way back when, just is ridiculous. The guy was a dynamite bass player, dynamite pop bass player, all along.
Not if you ask Quincy Jones.
Yeah. Well, I'm not asking him.
So strange.
Yeah, it was an odd one, wasn't it?
That was such a strange thing. And then, of course, everybody responded by, when did Quincy Jones produce the Beatles? Well, he never did. He never worked with them in any kind of capacity until they were all solo. So it's just one of those, such a strange thing to say. And I'm a big fan of Quincy Jones. He's made some great records. And he also has some wonderful quotes. When he was talking about Stevie Wonder, when asked what was great about Stevie Wonder, he said that Stevie Wonder always left enough room for God, meaning Stevie Wonder never let his ego get in the way. He always just did what was best for the song and wasn't all about insecurities and egos and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so let me get some questions, because I'm talking too much as usual. Warren, can you organize a Ringo live chat? Sure. I do have some. No, I can't go to that. I won't be able to do a live chat with him, but I might be able to get some questions answered. I love this stuff so much as Lost with DAWs. This is why the Academy rocks. It's not just for tools; it's a process and a collaborative effort. Exactly, and that's why it's nice that we have all of you guys and girls here talking to each other and helping each other out. To that comment, I would encourage people not to dismiss the tools that we have, or
like live in the past. There are ways that you can emulate the past, and I'm not talking about, just like software emulations, but you can bring the thought process both to your engineering and your production that went into the recordings that we love, some of these classic recordings we love. You can bring those right into a DAW. You can set limitations for yourself if you choose to. You can say, I'm only going to give myself 16 tracks to get this done. I'm only going to give myself 8 tracks to get this done. I'm going to work with one reverb. I'm going to work, there's all sorts of things that you can do to bring your mind into the process that made these songs. And, I love that, I don't have to worry about tape biases and alignment of heads and noise floors. I mean, I introduce a noise floor now. I don't have to fight a noise floor. That's a win. So, the vintage stuff is wonderful. And if you can get your hands on and work with it, fantastic. Not necessary for great music, though.
Right. Blah, blah, blah. Tell Mac it's a P bass. I might have missed where that question or what that statement came from. I'm sorry,
Was that
everybody.
the earlier session about the precision, McCartney using a precision, maybe?
Yeah, somebody insisted, it wasn't an Academy member, that Paul McCartney recorded with a precision. But when I asked him to say which songs, there was no response. He just said, ask Ken Scott. I mean, I can ask Ken Scott, but it's just like, but if you know for a fact, I'm not trying to troll back, but if somebody knows for a fact that there's they just need to tell us,
Yeah, and in the work that I've done, Volume 1, there were a handful of the second edition of Volume 1 is out now with Volume 2, and there were a handful of corrections that people had brought to my attention that a lot of them were just oversights, but there were a handful of things that they that caused me to look at the material again and consider the point of view. But with the work that I'm doing, it's all about chapter and verse. So speculation to me doesn't have a lot of value.
Right.
I heard that isn't intellectually rigorous. So I mean, I love to know what I've done wrong to make these as right as possible. And if you find something, let me know. Yeah.
Well, Paul McCartney died in 66 or something, didn't he? There was an imposter who sang on Penny Lane. I've read that one.
Yeah, his name was Billy Shears.
Billy Shears sang on Penny Lane, and it's not because the music was sped up with very speed, like we all know. It's because there's a different person singing it. I've read that one. I've heard that one.
Yeah.
There's also a video of a guy that looks ever so slightly like Paul McCartney with raised eyebrows, standing in front of his childhood house that everybody says really is Paul McCartney, and that Billy Shears is now Paul McCartney. There's even photos where people have taken pictures of Paul McCartney then and now and said, how can this be the same person? Even though there's this thing called aging, which apparently people I mean, it's all kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah. I'm sure there are things that we don't know, which would be really interesting and cool. And there's things that we assume that are wrong, that might be factual. I mean, that's just life, isn't it? But I don't think there's any major. Bernard Purdie was not in the Beatles, and Paul McCartney did not die in 1966. So I think we're both pretty sure of those two.
Pretty solid on those.
Yeah. There was a question here. There's a couple of things. Jerry, do you think that because the Beatles couldn't play live because of the PA restrictions and the noise or the girls screaming, did that help the band? Did that make them love the studio even more?
They were a great live band, and they enjoyed that experience while it lasted. Loving the studio more, I think it was just a different it was just a different time in their lives. You know, they had done, as we talked about earlier, once the Beatles had done something, because they became the Beatles, and whatever happened to them happened at such a over-the-top level that once they were through with it, they were through with it. And so being able to spend time in the studio creating, and they were always surrounded by friends in the studio. It's something not a lot of people are aware of. You know, we tend to think of, and I've always tended to think of the studio as like a real private sort of environment. But the Beatles always had friends hanging out. You know, the Stones were hanging out a lot. During the Pepper sessions, you know, the Monkees came over from the U.S. and hung out, and they always had their friends, you know, there, around them while they were creating, and so it was a comfortable place. There wasn't the craziness of Beatlemania around them. That, you know, they'd left that behind. So and they were ambitious to make great pop music. This might have been a competition thing with the Beach Boys in the U.S. It's a well-known kind of musical rivalry, not a us versus them, but more of the an aspirational rivalry that, you know, the Beach Boys are doing such cool stuff. I wish we should make music like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there, you know, is that going on? So, you know, the studio and their ability to take it over and work the hours they wanted to work, that opened that world up to them. And, you know, no doubt they enjoyed it for quite a long time until, you know, toward the end where that got old. So,
right. I'm looking here. I was actually interested because I went online to look about Peter and Gordon, A World Without Love.
Oh, great song. Such a
great song. It was a fantastic song. Now, was it really a true Lennon and McCartney, or was it more of a McCartney?
Well, you know, see, I don't get into those fights.
No, it's not so much a fight. I just wondered if it.
But you know, in my personal opinion, very strongly McCartney led. Yeah, very strongly McCartney led tune.
Yeah, I had a book, and I don't know what happened to it. I had a book a couple of years ago, like 20 years ago, that had all of the alleged breakdown, the analysis of every song. Bye, Oz, Macca. Bye, Andrew. Sorry you have to go to work. He just said sorry he has to go to work. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching. In Australia, so it's sort of like a different part of the day over there.
Definitely.
Mr. McKenzie.
Yeah, there are a handful of you know, rigorously academic breakdowns. Revolution in the Head is one of them. I think Phil McDonald wrote that, and that's one of those books that mixes music theory with history around the Beatles, and through that level, that type of analysis, you can say, you know, these sorts of song structures are characteristic of McCartney, whereas Y is characteristic of Lennon. And so if the song has a predominantly, you know, X structure, we can guess that McCartney led it. If it's a Y structure, we can guess that Lennon led it, even if it's a co-credited composition.
But then Baby You're a Rich Man, that sounds more like a McCartney song, but we all know it's a Lennon song. How could you feel to be one of the beautiful people?
Another one quarter, as we were talking about.
Yeah.
E, right?
No, it's G.
G.
Baby, you're a rich man. Baby, you're a rich man too. Well, it's a 1/4. I think it's a 1/4/5. But there's the G and the G7 comes in nicely. But yeah, it's one of those songs that you know, maybe to feel to be one of the beautiful people, and that you know who you are. It's such a pretty melody, if I played you that and said with me singing it, who wrote it, you'd think it was a Paul song. So, yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? When people start analyzing.
And there's something as far as like the songwriting goes between them to always remember is, they wrote together, but they were also again, not a adversarial competition with each other, but in competition with each other, learning from each other. McCartney took some of Lennon's, hard rocking bluesy lessons when he did Helter Skelter. Right. Just the same way that Lennon took some of McCartney's, Blackbird lessons when he's doing a song like Julia.
Right. Oh, I love that song. That's my mother's name, Julia. I remember playing that song when I was a kid, when I first started getting really heavily into the Beatles, playing that song. And I go into the kitchen in my little tiny little house that we had, and my mother was crying her eyes out.
Oh. Mm-hmm. You got some good memories tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful song. Whenever I meet anybody called Julia, I always tell them, I'm like, I always say, that's my mother's name and John Lennon's mother's name. And AJ wants to remember, what was the song we were talking about where Ringo played drums and sang on? That was in the earlier one.
It was a quick one too. Just a sec here. I'll get to that. Not If You've Got Trouble. Sorry, guys. Act Naturally is pretty. I'm blanking on it. Maybe. Oh, you know what? We were in our different era here for this. What was the song? Nah, I'm blanking. Sorry, guys.
I can't remember what it was. We might have been. It might have been
earlier.
I'm looking up now, see what I can find out. Anybody remember what was the? No, it wasn't I Want to Be. Oh yeah, was it Boys?
Yeah, it was Boys.
Yeah,
it was Boys.
Yeah, everybody who watched it before was Boys. Yeah, that was the song. Thanks everybody for reminding us. Patrick, hi. Diego, boys. Diego was on earlier. Hey, Diego. Here's an interesting one. Lex says, thanks for taking the time to do this, gents. I've been listening for a while and enjoying the conversation. Thank you, Lex. Mark says, did Jimi Hendrix spend any time with the Beatles in the studio?
No.
Never came down while they were tracking?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, they crossed paths. The most famous Hendrix-related Beatles story is that I think just a couple of days after Pepper came out, Hendrix opens his set for one of his London concerts with Sgt. Pepper playing it, and some of the Beatles were there to watch that happen. I don't believe he was a friend or a visitor in that era.
Yeah, I think. That's an interesting one. I feel like the only Beatles and Hendrix stories I can think of, I've got a few weird stories that not many people know, because I know that an old friend of mine who's now dead, and when I say old, I mean old, like 30 plus years ago, there was a guy called Jimmy Henshaw who was in a band in England called the VIPs, and Jimmy was a big session guitar player in the 60s, played on a lot of records that nobody knew he played on, and the band was the VIPs, and it had Mike Harrison, who went on to be in Spooky Tooth and Junkyard Angel, for those people that are fanatics of late 60s, early 70s kind of music. And Mike was the singer with Jimmy in the VIPs. and they actually all tried out. The VIPs were like were session players. They actually tried out to be Jimmy's backing band.
Oh yeah.
Before Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding. And I don't know if anybody knows that story, but it's not folklore. It's true and they didn't want the gig. They didn't think it was going to work. And they were big session players, session musicians, sorry, in London at the time, playing on everybody's records. And Jimmy, I think, was like voted Melody Maker or New Musical Express, guitar player of the year a couple of times. But it's just pretty funny how not everybody got it and not everybody understood. But I think they had a pretty good career. The VIPs did pretty well. They ended up breaking up in the late 60s, and then Junkyard Angel and Spooky Tooth and all that stuff, that came out of the ashes of that kind of stuff. But it's funny, some of those. Who knows? I think we want to romanticize that everybody knew everybody, and I think in England they probably did. In London, when I say England specifically, in London they probably did. There was probably a certain amount of like going to a nightclub. But I wonder, were like the Beatles the royalty, and then there was everybody else, or was it just kind of everybody? I wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't answer that kind of question, but clearly the Beatles were always a cut above after they became the Beatles, and
right.
McCartney carries that cachet to this day.
Yes, of course.
That no matter who's in the room, if McCartney's in the room with them, McCartney's bigger than they are.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with musicianship or it's really just, I think it's a manifestation of the impact that they have, influence, and, the Beatles are, as far as like, global record sales, most people know this. I mean, the next closest, I think, is Elvis to the Beatles sales. And we're talking Elvis is 500 million units below the Beatles.
Right.
It's just not even close.
Right.
So, yeah, I'd have to believe that, they were royalty in London in that,
yep.
In that era.
Oh,
Hard
I
to
agree.
believe they wouldn't have been.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I can't imagine anybody else coming close to it. But I also get the feeling, from what I can tell, is that I think they worked harder. I feel like they were in the studio more making music and less, partying, from what I could tell. I mean, I don't know if that's correct, but it seemed like they were all, because their albums are so much more accomplished sounding by Rubber Soul, Revolver on than anybody else in that part of that period. Maybe the Small Faces with Odd Guns, Nut Gone, Flake. That's pretty much a masterpiece. I feel like Procol Harum on Salty Dog and Whiter Shade of Pale, definitely those albums were quite accomplished. Moody Blues had accomplished albums.
That particular song, Whiter Shade of Pale, had a huge influence on Lennon.
Yeah.
Lennon just loved that track. A lot of what you're talking about, as we mentioned before, is the result of the fact that they got time no one else got to make their music. They had, they weren't booking hours in the studio; they were blocking it out, and that allowed them to mature their sound. But they were a very hardworking band. We talked about in the earlier session. They believed in rehearsing. They worked out arrangements. They were very careful. They knew they were working with 4 tracks. There wasn't like we can do whatever we want. They knew what they were working with, and they worked with their limitations. So, they have an idea for a song, they have an idea of what they want to do with it, and now with their team, the engineers and Martin as producer, they go about executing that idea, and they practice it and practice it and practice it, and sometimes it's after the backing track's down, there's a group overdub, and they know that in this, because of the limitations they've got, that they've got to be able to fit in backing vocals, percussion, the solo guitar. They know what they have to get done, and then they rehearse it and they get it done.
Right.
Hardworking band to the end.
I agree entirely. Sean says, what, and let's make this quick. What's your feeling about Paul working with like Kanye and Rihanna?
The track they did is a cool track. I mean, again, McCartney has always, and the Beatles always, they wanted to do something new. Now, has McCartney in his later years become a bit of a fame chaser? Who's to say?
Yeah, I don't know.
There's, you could, slap the same accusation on someone like Dave Grohl. They want to play with everybody.
We should not open that door.
Well, they want to play. They want to play. They want to play with. They want to play with everyone they can play with that they like. And
the last Grammys that was on, Jack Douglas, we were working together, and Jack says to me, he goes, "So I hear there's going to be a rare appearance of Dave Grohl this year." Yeah, exactly. Okay, so God bless Jack. Michael B says, any studio pre-production steps that the Beatles did that we could benefit from today? I almost feel like we're sort of talking about that because they had the ability to come in with basic demos and flesh them out in the studio. So their pre-production and recording and everything was always the same thing. That would be my answer. Is that correct?
So, depending on the era, as you get into the later work, they did flesh out ideas in the studio.
Right.
But if you're talking about a workflow, clearly they were coming in with songs that they believed were strong candidates to record. That's the first step of it. The second step of it was that song goes to your producer. And your producer weeds out the crap in it and helps make it as strong as possible. And that's what Martin had a gift for doing. Martin had a gift for identifying introductions and endings to songs to really, make the first thing you hear make you want to keep listening to that track, and the last thing you hear make you want to hear it again. And so there's an editing process that goes on in there. Again, something we talked about in relation to Revolver on the first session was Taxman initially ended with them coming out of the chorus and there's a version out there. It might be on Anthology, I don't know, but it ends with Taxman, do song's over. Vocal ending. Well, that didn't cut the mustard, and so Martin took the solo section. And now at the end, he pastes in the solo section, extends the song a little bit, and you get a reprise of that blistering McCartney solo at the very end of it as you're leaving the track. You just want more of that. It's such a great solo. So getting that arrangement right, there's half the battle. They were, then on the back end, the engineering team that was working with them, the technical engineers, recording engineers, they were ready to work. They were always ready to work, and so I guess that's the big lesson. At whatever phase you're involved in the recording process, be ready to do your job. Know what's necessary for your role in the creation of that song, and be ready to do your job. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is pretty darn exciting. Let's have a look at a couple more questions here. Frame Junkie says, hearing both of you in dialogue, I feel overwhelmed with questions to ask. The lifelong engineering skills you surely provide further insights to our mixing projects. I'll just listen and absorb. Thank you very much. Mark says, so cool. I can't help but feel that Jimmy shared a similar approach to the studio to the Beatles. Yes, I think he did indeed. Sir Paul McCartney, somebody said, well, he is Sir Paul McCartney. Well, that's
true.
Thanks for the great info. Looking forward to volume 2. Have to take off for dinner. Okay, see you later, Alex. Thank you for watching. Danny says, great work. Got ahead. Thanks, guys. You're welcome. Thanks, Danny. Sean's got to put his kid to bed. Thanks for the insight and chat. Love you both.
They're dropping like flies.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Sounds like setting boundaries is huge at creating great things. I think that's a good point Mark's making about working with 4 and 8 tracks.
Yeah.
Patrick wants to know, and Eric, can you answer this question, please? Is this going to be available easily and quickly? I mean, this remains on YouTube as unlisted. So yeah, Patrick, you have the link. It's unlisted, but you'll be able to watch it again from the beginning. It might take YouTube about 20 minutes to figure that out. They usually have this processing thing. So, but yes, within about, say, half an hour, you should be able to watch it again from the beginning. AJ says it's on Taxman version 11 on the anthology. I'm not sure what that means.
Probably Anthology 2 then. It's probably Anthology 2 he's talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. You might be talking about Take 11.
Right. What is it about Take 11? Is there something specific? I'm not sure what he's saying. AJ.
No, if he's saying that, just a second here.
Let's check it out. Yeah, Patrick, when we finish up, you'll be able to go back and watch those. All people are coming back on again. Great. So, guys, those of you that are just tuning in now, you'll be able to go and watch this again from the beginning. You're going to hear me talking to my friend Patrick Hannon, who's the drummer from the Sundays. He says the ending. AJ says the ending. Taxman version 11. One, two,
yeah, I'm having a hard time reading my own writing here. Hold on a second. RM5 and 6 were the two remixes that were edited to extend it. So RM5 was the version that wasn't the lengthiest of them, and then they pasted the solo onto the end.
Right. That's amazing. I didn't know that.
The stuff we've also talked about this in the past. I mean, you do what you have to do to get the song done. When we were talking about the use of Varispeed in relation to auto-tune, that sometimes you can't hit the note, and so you help them hit the note. And the Beatles did that in their way, just the same way that that we'll do those things today if necessary. Now, I think it depends on what kind of producer you are or engineer you are, whether you want to encourage your artist to give it a little bit more. And there's where an artist will be like, I can't hit that note. I just can't hit that note. And do you say, yeah, okay, you can't hit the note, we'll auto-tune it, or do you say, I'll bet you can. Let's figure out how you can hit that note and work with them to get to get that performance that ultimately they're going to be in my opinion they're usually ultimately more proud of that sort of thing. So, but I'm an old man, so yeah, I believe in pushing people in the studio in an encouraging way, but pushing them to do work that they'll be proud of. And I always take the angle of, you're never going to work on this song again. This is it. This is your time with this song to make it, the coolest song you can make it. So make the most of that opportunity.
Right. I agree 100%. This is fantastic. I do think we have to wrap up in a few minutes, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again for great work, Warren. Thanks for your time, Jerry. We'll be tuning in later to listen to the full conversation. Cheers. On Help, there was a 2-minute song, A Target for the Time or Space Constraints.
No, they did. They did do. There was one song. I think it's "I Need You."
Yep.
That they. Am I thinking of that? I think "I Need You" was recorded in a couple of sections and allow them to work with it. And this might, I might be totally, out of my mind on that one. And I might be confusing that with work they did on A Hard Day's Night. There was certainly at least one track that the Beatles recorded, and they recorded in a section A and section B. If you guys will give me just a quick second here, I might be able to find it here. I'll Cry Instead was what. So,
right.
That was one that they did. That was one I was thinking of. It was definitely recorded with time constraints in mind to be able to edit it to a sequence. And the sequence that they believe that it was being edited toward was what it ended up being "Can't Buy Me Love," that when they're running in the field.
Right.
So that's what they created the song to be able to edit it to, then didn't end up using it in that way.
Michael O'Rourke says, so the guys was all instruments, vocals, etc. recorded at one time, at the same time? And I said, yes, most of the time.
Yeah, that's true, especially for the early work. Now, as they went on down the road, the backing tracks got more and more sparse, where it might only be a guitar, drums and bass, or a piano, drums and bass. Taxman started that way.
AJ's saying, are the books available in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that they're available through Amazon. So just
I'll put up an Amazon link in a little bit, gentlemen.
Yeah, that's going to be the way to get it. I checked. I mean, they're available in in Japan, but I think it takes 3 months for you to get delivery of it.
Really?
Yeah. So I think that's what I saw in Volume 1 months ago. Yeah, so Volume 1 and 2 are out, so you're covering 1961 all the way through 66.
Right. I am just checking out now. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to find it for you, AJ. Going to find it. So let me ask a quick question before I get too carried away with doing all this stuff. I recently read Jeff Emmerich's book and just started Ken Scott's. It'd be interesting to see what the stories intersect and don't. Jeff's book was fantastic. Yeah, I would be interested to know, Rob. I haven't read Ken's yet. If there's a moment where they're two completely different books.
Well, keep in mind that their work didn't intersect on that many occasions.
Oh, okay.
Their career arc at EMI in the studios was a little bit different. Ken went from tape operator, tape library, to a tape op or a second engineer. Then he went to the cutting room, cutting and mastering. And then he came back into the engineering chair, whereas Emmerich did the tape op to engineer path. And when Ken would have really revealed himself to Emmerich in what he was doing was when Emmerich left. Emmerich was fed up.
Right.
So I think the thing to remember with the autobiographies is take them with a grain of salt. Think about your own memories of your life when you were in if you're older. I can't remember what I was doing on July 22nd, 1969. They happen to have tape logs that tell them what they might have been doing. but that's memory's a funny thing, and there's wonderful stories that are burned into those guys' memories that they share with us in both those books. But memory's a funny thing.
Yeah. All right, guys, I put both the links up. So you can go to both books. Diego says he has to go to a lesson. Thanks for live stream today. Did Yoko ever make it on a Beatles record?
I'm sorry. Did Yoko?
Yeah. Did Yoko? Which one?
Hey Bungalow Bill. She's sings back.
Hey Bungalow Bill.
Yeah.
What did you kill?
Linda McCartney and Yoko are singing backing vocals on Hey Jude.
Oh yeah, along with a lot of other people. Yeah.
With a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Yoko made it. Yoko's on wax with the Beatles. Linda's on wax with the Beatles.
Right.
I love Linda McCartney. I love Yoko. I mean, they're just, they're part of the story. Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah, they're part of the story. I mean, when people got on Linda with the whole, Wings thing and, she's not a magician or a musician and blah, blah, blah. And, I always go back to Hey Jude, and I just tell people, Hey Jude wouldn't sound like Hey Jude if Linda didn't sing on it. It's just the way it is. Right. That's the alchemy of music. It's that whole group of people that ends up working on a track, from the engineer to the artist to their friends in some cases, that make it sound the way it sounds. Just the way it is.
Yep. Oh, I agree. So beautiful. So beautiful. All right. We are going to go. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks, Academy.
Thank you ever so much. Those are the links for the books. Please click on them now before they disappear. I'll add them both underneath the live stream as well. Mark's singing along with the F, E flat, B flat part. All right. You guys and girls all rock. Thank you ever so much for being so freaking awesome, and very excited. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing, and we'll do more of these live streams, especially as Jerry gets to get out some new books and we can talk about new stuff. We've roughly kept it around the period of book 2. Please buy his book. I think that would be absolutely amazing. I think he's done a lot of great research, and we appreciate his time. It's worth a lot to us here. So thanks very much, Jerry. You rock.
Thanks, Warren. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, everybody. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing. Are we going to sign out, young Eric? Say goodbye to Eric, everybody. Bye, Eric.